All right, let's dive in. Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive where we dig deep into the stuff you want to learn about.
Yeah.
And today we were talking all about Vasco da Gama.
Oh, this is going to be
It
exciting.
is going to be exciting. Now, you probably already know him as like the guy who found a sea route to India,
Right.
but there's so much more to this story than that.
Oh, yeah. Da Gama's journey, it wasn't just like some fun little adventure. I
Right.
mean, it really changed the way the world worked, like with trade and exploration and how Europe and Asia connect,
Yeah, absolutely.
even to this day.
Okay, so picture this. It's Europe in the late 1400s, like 1490s.
Yeah.
We're talking age of exploration, right?
Yeah.
All the major European powers are like in this mad dash to find the fastest way to get to Asia.
Riches of the East.
Yes, all the good stuff, all the spices, everything's over there, right? But
Yeah.
here's the problem. The land routes are all controlled by the Ottoman Empire.
Who, weren't exactly known for their bargain prices.
Yeah, they were not giving out any deals.
Well.
So it was like a super competitive scene, right? It wasn't just spices and silk. It was about, being the most powerful and the richest kingdom.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. It was like winner takes all.
Basically, yeah.
Finding a new way to get to the East, by sea, that would be huge.
It would be like hitting the jackpot.
Exactly.
So enter Vasco da Gama, born in 1460 in Sines, Portugal.
Okay.
Now, his family, they were nobility, so they weren't exactly, struggling.
Right.
But what's really interesting is that his dad, Esteban da Gama, was a big-time explorer himself.
That's fascinating. Like, talk about having some big shoes to fill.
Right.
I bet all those stories growing up really shaped who Vasco da Gama became.
Yeah, like he was kind of destined to follow in those footsteps.
But exactly.
So it's 1497. King Manuel of Portugal gives da Gama this mission, and it was like a really, really big deal. Find a sea route to India.
Wow.
Could you imagine having that on your shoulders?
That's some serious pressure.
Right, because back then, sailing into, basically uncharted territory, that was like insanely dangerous.
It was. You're talking about storms that could just wipe you off the map and scurvy.
Or Derby. Yeah.
Oh, that was basically a death sentence back then.
Yeah.
So yeah, the risks were huge.
Enormous. So da Gama, this guy, he was fearless. He set sail with 4 ships and like 170 men.
Wow.
And get this, his flagship, the San Gabriel, it was what they called a carrack.
Okay.
Now, this was a new type of ship that they designed specifically for, long voyages and rough seas.
It really shows you how advanced Portugal was.
Yeah, they were like at the forefront of shipbuilding technology.
Yeah, the carrack was a game changer for exploration, that's for sure.
Totally.
I mean, it's no coincidence that Portugal was leading the pack when it came to exploration.
Exactly. So after months and months battling the elements and figuring out where they're going, da Gama rounds the Cape of Good Hope.
Oh, that's a big moment.
Big moment.
Yeah.
And finally, on May 20th, 1498, he reaches Calicut.
On the southwest coast of India.
Yes, after almost a year at sea. Think about that. He reaches India.
Incredible.
And he does what everyone thought was impossible.
And just like that, history changed forever.
Totally.
I mean, this wasn't just some adventure. It shifted the balance of power.
Yeah.
Now, Europe had a direct route to all those spices and silks and riches in Asia.
And they could completely bypass the Ottoman Empire.
It was a game changer.
A total game changer.
Yeah. But this voyage, it also kind of reveals another side to da Gama, a less heroic side.
Oh, really?
Yeah, especially when it comes to like how he dealt with the local rulers and merchants in India.
I can imagine.
One account actually describes his arrival in Calicut, and the Zamarin, who was the Hindu ruler,
Right.
he was immediately suspicious of them.
Yeah, I mean, think about it. You've
Yeah.
got this, European fleet just showing up out of nowhere.
Out of the blue.
Yeah, demanding to trade?
Right.
I'd be a little suspicious, too.
And, I think da Gama was just so focused on his mission
Right.
that he just totally missed, like, the cultural differences and
Yeah.
the politics of the situation.
You probably thought they'd be like, oh, awesome, come on in.
Yeah. Like, welcome, let's trade.
Red carpet treatment.
Exactly. And when that didn't happen, I mean, his actions got a lot more, aggressive.
Aggressive.
Yeah, like there's this one source that says he gave the Zamarin gifts,
Okay.
but the gifts were seen as, like, insulting.
Oh, no.
So yeah, that didn't really help things.
Not a great start to a trade relationship.
Right. It's almost like he was more interested in showing them who's boss than making a deal.
It's a good point. I mean, it's like a classic example of how exploration, sometimes I had this like ugly side.
Yeah.
It's not always about discovery and adventure. It can be about colonialism and taking advantage of people.
That's the dark side of it, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good reminder that history, it's complicated.
It is.
So anyway, Da Gama eventually gets back to Portugal with a shipload of spices, right?
He does, yeah, and he's treated like a hero.
Of course.
I mean, everyone sees this voyage as a huge win,
Yeah.
and it sets off a wave of Portuguese expeditions to the east.
So they're all trying to get a piece of that action.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But, those early encounters in India, they kind of foreshadow the trouble that's coming.
Between Europe and Asia.
Right.
So Da Gama opens the door to the east, but it's like opening Pandora's box a little bit.
That's a good way to put it, yeah.
So what happens next? He doesn't just like retire, right?
No, not at all. Portugal, they want to make the most of this new route, so in 1502, they send Da Gama back to India.
Okay.
But this time, he's not just an explorer.
He's in charge.
Yeah, he's the commander of a fleet of 20 ships, heavily armed ships.
Wow.
And his mission, well, it's to make sure Portugal controls the region.
So this is where things get maybe a little darker.
Unfortunately, yes.
Okay.
During this second voyage, Da Gama, he does some pretty brutal things.
Like what?
Well, there's this one incident that really stands out.
Yeah.
He captured a merchant ship, the Miri.
Okay.
It was carrying Muslim pilgrims from Mecca.
Oh.
And, well, he seized the ship, took everything valuable, and then he had the ship set on fire.
With everyone on board.
Yeah.
That's awful.
It was a really cruel act, and it really changed how people saw Da Gama.
Yeah, it makes you wonder how someone who achieves so much could also do something so terrible.
It's a tough question.
Right. It's like he's a hero and a villain at the same time.
Right, and some historians say he was just, a man of his time.
So he was just doing what everyone else was doing.
Right, and back then, violence and conquest, they were just seen as part of how you gained power.
So like a different set of rules.
Yeah, exactly, but of course, that doesn't make it right.
It helps to understand the context.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's just crazy to think about how, back then they didn't see it the same way that we do now.
Yeah, it's a totally different mindset.
Right, right. Well, anyway, so Da Gama's story, it doesn't end there, does it?
No, not at all. Despite, all the controversy and the brutality, Da Gama was, and still is, a really important figure in Portuguese history.
Okay.
In 1524, he was appointed Viceroy of India.
Viceroy. So he goes from like explorer to like governor.
Exactly. He was basically in charge of running this massive and super complex territory.
Wow, I bet that was a tough job.
It definitely had its challenges.
Yeah.
So as Viceroy Da Gama, he tried to solidify Portugal's control over India.
Right.
He really focused on building up their navy there and making sure they had a monopoly on trade.
Ah, so like controlling all the good stuff coming in and out.
Exactly. He even set up a pass system for ships that were sailing in the Indian Ocean.
Interesting.
Basically, if you wanted to trade in that area, you had to pay Portugal.
Sounds like he was really determined to make Portugal the top dog in the Indian Ocean.
Yeah, and some historians argue that, even though his methods were pretty harsh, they were necessary.
To keep Portugal in power.
Right, because it was a really cutthroat environment back then.
Yeah, I guess everyone was trying to get ahead.
Exactly. But then other historians, they see it as just more of the same.
Oh, brutality.
Yeah, just another way for him to exploit India for Portugal's gain.
It's hard to say for sure, isn't it?
It really is, and that's what makes Da Gama's legacy so fascinating.
And so complicated. I mean, on the one hand, he opens up these new trade routes and expands Portugal's influence around the world.
Right.
But then on the other hand, he leaves this trail of violence and exploitation wherever he goes.
It's a tough pill to swallow, for sure.
Yeah, it definitely makes you think about the whole idea of exploration in a different light.
It does.
Okay, so as we're wrapping up this deep dive into Vasco da Gama, what are the main takeaways? What do we want people to remember?
Well, first, the Da Gama's voyages, they completely changed how the world worked.
Right.
They connected continents in a way that had never been done before.
Yeah.
And they really kicked off this whole new era of exploration.
But it's not all, sunshine and roses.
No, it's definitely not.
There's a lot of darkness there, too.
There is. And I think it's important to remember that Da Gama's story, it's not just about, discovering new lands.
Right.
It's about ambition. It's about clashes between cultures. And it's about the really tragic effects of colonialism.
So it's not just an adventure story. It's much deeper than that.
Exactly. It's a story that makes you think about, what are the limits of exploration?
And what responsibilities do people have when they go to new places and meet new cultures?
Right, because it's easy to just focus on the exciting parts of exploration.
Yeah.
But Da Gama's story, it forces us to confront the darker side of it too.
Yeah, I think that's a good point to end on.
It is.
So, as you all keep learning and exploring and digging into these topics, remember to look past the surface,
Yeah, there's always more to the story.
Always. And who knows what you might find when you really start digging.
Exactly.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive, and we'll see you next time.